Okay, well, welcome. Somebody else just signed on. I'm not gonna put my phone number on here, but if you have my phone number, you can text me, or you can say things in the chat. There's a live chat here, um, and then I'm also on Zoom with Charlie right now. We'll see if anybody else pops on here. But welcome. We're going to have some discussion about this sermon series, "Render unto Caesar." Last week in Bible study, what did we do? We talked about the idea of civil religion. That was a longer conversation. Today, we're going to wrestle a little bit with this idea of a Christian America. I didn't know if anybody had any questions or things they wanted to talk about from what I was preaching. If you were in the sermons, Charlie, any questions you had after Sunday in particular?
I could think of.
Sunday I really tried to wrestle with the political nature of the Bible. That the Bible does not, there's no presidents and there's no Senate and Congress, but it attacks. It critiques it relates to the politics of its day, and I think you have to read the Bible that way. I think it's kind of important too. And really, honestly, until I did research for this sermon series, I'm re-preaching this series. A few years ago, I hadn't really looked at the Bible that way. I do a lot more now. In the last few years, that's probably been the two biggest things that have happened in my study of Scripture. Is I look a lot more at sort of the political intricacies. In other words, Jesus got killed because he told these stories, because he did these teachings, he did this miracle. So the question is, what was so offensive about what he does? And Paul got killed because of his ministry. So I think to come into those things, understanding how those offended somebody. So why were those so offensive to certain people? And then the other thing I think that's changed my Bible reading quite a bit is actually going to the Holy Land and thinking the Bible through. So I read the Bible much more politically. Can you just take that camera away? I keep looking at it, but it's not on. And much more geographically. I pay much more attention to the maps and to the little geographic details that are given in the passage than I ever did before. So this sermon, I was just trying to give a little push in that direction for people. Probably the most pushing statement that I made. I remember last time I preached a version of this sermon, one of my buddies said to me, maybe you pushed a little too hard in the saying that Jesus was a political refugee, Middle Eastern refugee. I didn't think I did. I think that's just a fact about Jesus's childhood. That doesn't. I didn't try to say what I would do in terms of policy or relating to anything current. I was just saying, to look at the politics of the moment there. I don't know. Are there any other comments? Karen is saying the passcode for Zoom does not work. Karen, it was just the numbers 1 through 9, right, Charlie? Or did you use a link?
I just went through internet, linked into it.
Oh, Karen. Karen, I don't know what to tell you on the password, but do you get the weekly email? Because the passcode was on there. Let me see.
Yeah, it was linked. That's how
I have a direct link on the email. I'm having some tech problems. Karen, you might be on YouTube then. Sorry about that. I'm not in a good position to help you because I've had to go to my backups on computers and things too. I'm zooming on my phone. Okay, but I am getting your messages, Karen. So if you have questions, comments, you can go right in there.
I think one of the comments that you looked at yesterday when you said that people wanted a king and God was more or less saying, hey, I am your king. You don't need a person as a king because he's just going to take from you.
Yeah, I don't know how well YouTube can hear Charlie's comments. But one of the things I talked about was when the people wanted a king and God didn't want to give them a king, and through Samuel said, you're not going to want a king. A king's going to take your people. He's going to take your land. He's going to tax your crops. That's just a reality, I think, of leadership. And I didn't mean to push that too hard either, but it's just part of the nature of kings, presidents, senators, congressmen, right? That there's a level of self-interest that comes into play there, right? And that was very true in the ancient world too. Okay. So today I want to wrestle with this idea. Tonight I want to wrestle with this idea of a Christian America. And I made some arguments in my first sermon in the series about, is America a Christian nation? Was it ever a Christian nation? And I think it depends what you mean by that. If you mean that America was ever officially Christian, the answer is no. The forefathers were very serious about separating faith and civility, right? That your politics and your faith aren't the same thing. It doesn't mean they don't relate to each other. It just means they're never merged. So yes, our documents, founding documents like the Declaration of Independence, I mean, you will find stuff about God, and you will find things about God on our coins. But it's in a much more generic sense, not particularly Christian. Many of our forefathers would have been considered deists, so they did believe in a general God. There weren't very many atheists. Most people believed in God generally, and then believed in decided what they believed from there. So I said in my first sermon, Thomas Jefferson took the Bible and literally cut and paste elements out of it to make his own Jefferson New Testament. He did it with the Gospels. And he liked the sayings of Jesus and some of the nice things Jesus did. He didn't believe any of the miracles of Jesus, resurrection of Jesus, none of that. So I do believe that America was founded on Judeo-Christian values. That's the way I like to say it, Judeo-Christian values. There's a certain amount of work ethic, morality, liberty, and freedom that are infused. And certainly a number of Christians influenced the founding of this country. But some are not. Like for instance, a lot of people want to say, well, we even have the 10 Commandments set up in our courts. Well, do you know how a lot of those 10 Commandments got into our courtrooms? It was Cecil B. DeMille. When he wrote the movie, when he put out the movie, The 10 Commandments, donated to a lot of courtrooms the 10 Commandments to be prominently placed in the courtroom. Okay, so a lot of courtrooms, Christians get upset that when the 10 Commandments are removed from courtrooms, but they were there a lot because of Cecil B. DeMille. You won't find a lot of those in early American courtrooms. So, despite what I'm saying, that America was never a totally Christian nation, never a Sunday where everybody was in church, never a time when everyone would have said they were Christian. Still, the influence of Christianity has always been a part of this country and has shaped this country in a lot of ways. And part of what I want to say today is that hasn't always been a good thing. Okay, and to talk about this, there were three sort of theologies that influence our country that I'm not sure were always such a good thing. Okay, number one is millennialism. We're going to talk about what that means. Number two is colonialism, and number three is replacement theology. Okay, so we're going to just go through these three theological sort of elements that I think were part of Christianity's influence on America that weren't always necessarily good. And then next week in my sermon and then in a Bible study, we're going to talk about the other way in which I think Christianity has done a disservice to our country, which is the way the church has been complicit in a lot of racism and in the keeping of slaves early on in American history, particularly. Not that, I mean, Christians also fought to free slaves, so we'll try to balance that out. But for instance, the first slaves that were brought to the United States were brought on a ship named after John the Baptist. I mean, just think about that. The first slave ship to come to the United States, to the colonies, was named after John the Baptist. It's not a great legacy there. Okay, so first, millennialism. Millennialism relates to Revelation in the end times. So millennialism is this idea that there's going to be this 1,000-year reign of Jesus, a millennium of reign of Jesus, before the final judgment. And so the idea was the theological idea became we need to help that along. Like in the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, man, that's really bad. We need Jesus to come back right now. And so there was a guy named Joachim of Fior, lived from 1135 to 1202. But he wrote about that there was a third age coming. Okay, so the first age was the age of the Father. Okay, that's pre-Jesus. Then the age of the Son. Okay, the age of Jesus. And then he talked about this third area, this third time period where it's going to be the reign of the Spirit. And we needed to help usher in that future. Okay, so this is partially the theology of the Crusades. The Crusades said, let's go get Jerusalem. If Jesus is going to reign, he has to reign in Jerusalem. And Muslims control Jerusalem, so we better go take over Jerusalem so that Jesus will come and the millennium will start. Okay, let's usher in this new third age. Okay, by the way, it's also an important theological theme in Nazi Germany. Okay, the idea of the Third Reich. Well, what's the First and the Second Reich? Okay, it's in the midst of this sort of theology. Now, why is this important? It's important because a guy named Christopher Columbus, this is Columbus Day, Christopher Columbus was a millennialist. In other words, he believed in this theology that we needed to fight and win back Jerusalem so that Jesus would return. And so when he wants to find this trade route to India, remember, he doesn't think he's going to the New World. He wants to go to India. Why? To have a trade route so that Europe can make enough money to basically fund a new crusade. Okay, that this is part of Columbus's thinking, is this millennialism. So in 1492, he was looking for a royal court that would agree to kick all the Jews out and send them back to the Holy Land, and would help fund out of this trip to India, this trade with India, would help fund a return to Jerusalem. Karen asks, how does Indigenous Day fit into Columbus Day? There's huge controversy here. I don't. I'd have to look into that more. I mean, I think Indigenous. Are you on Zoom?
They're talking about the Native Indians and Native Americans. Columbus, traditionally, I mean, that's what we're taught in the history books, but that's not what, Columbus really didn't found this country in part. So how do you fit that into, this millennial concept?
Yeah. Okay. So for you, if you're on YouTube, Karen, I'm glad you got on here. Karen's asking about Indigenous people as in Indigenous People Day. I think this is two separate issues. On the one hand, millennialism is Columbus's motivation for making the trip. But remember, he doesn't know that he's going to find indigenous people. He thinks he's going to India. And yes, there is a mistreatment of native peoples. Okay, and really the way we've told this history, I'm going to say this in my sermon this week, is kind of funny way of saying things, right? We say Columbus discovered America, right? He didn't discover America. Okay, there were people living here. That'd be like me saying I discovered Ohio. That's a very European-centered, Anglo-centered way of looking at history to say Columbus discovered a place that people already lived in. So, Karen, let me keep going because I think some of these other theological things become important to answering that. So then we'll come back. We'll circle back to this. Okay. So this idea of millennialism, and it's still been a part of America today, right? The Left Behind movies, Hal Lindsey's book, Late Great Planet Earth. We're still very fascinated with this Jesus coming back. My teacher, Len Sweet, used to get for some of his students at a website called Old Lutheran. They had shorts, and the shorts had Left Behind written on the left cheek of the shorts. So you could wear Left Behind shorts. I always wanted to have those, and they didn't sell them. They don't sell them anymore. Okay, millennialism was a big part of the motivation to come here. From there, then two other theologies I think play in. One is called colonialism. Okay, so as we get the New World, we get these. You'll hear about the East India Trading Company. You get all these different ways that Europeans are trying to force trade, and England is trying to control trade, and the Dutch are trying to control trade. You get this idea called colonialism. And what would happen is missionaries would often go on these boats to various places to start missions wherever the East India Trading Company or whoever else was taking them. But often what they would do is not just convert people to Christianity, they would convert people to Europeanism, right? So you would start schools not just to teach the Bible, but you would teach, if you were English, you would teach English. And you would teach these native people to start wearing English clothing, right? And so you didn't just, you were double converting them, not just to Christianity, but to also being like you. Okay. Christianity has never done well with that. Christianity always does better when it's in a fringe. Okay. Christianity grows where people groups are overlapping with each other, so that you can see how American your Christianity is, because you're meeting a Christian who's not American at all. But we got this idea of colonialism, like not just take the faith to other people, but a lot of missionaries were taking Europeanism, Englishism, Frenchism, whatever you want, or wherever you were from, tried to make the people be like you. And so you don't get indigenous Christianity. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody. Like the Christianity that you're reproducing good missionary work forms Christians that are authentically from where they're from. Okay, colonialism says, I'm going to make you like me in every way, with all of the, think of the religious, the language, the economics, the culture, all of that goes into that. So there's an elitism there, right? Like we've got this figured out. We are entitled to this land, to this trade, and we're on this. We're on a mission, an important sort of work. And for some of those people, if they were motivated theologically, it was typically millennialism. Okay, like Columbus. So Columbus, seeing this idea of this bigger vision of what he wants to accomplish and raise money, is not good to the Native Americans, right? He's not good to indigenous people. And a lot of the people that follow him are not good to indigenous people. There's a real sense of entitlement, and you could call it arrogance, you call it pride. But there's an abuse of a lot of the people, not just here in the United States, but you go down to Central America and into South America, and you find all kinds of peoples that are just wiped out because of coffee trade, gold trade. But the unfortunate thing is there's Christian language being used to defend some of this. Okay, and there's Christian missionaries going along with some of this. I remember, if you want a really tough view of this, Robert De Niro pretty early on in his career did a movie called The Mission, where he is a missionary that sort of gets into some of these issues. And there were some missionary groups that weren't into this kind of theology. One of the main ones being the Jesuits. Jesuits would not have gone along with a lot of this, but they were few and far between. And most of them are Catholic. Protestants did not do a lot of missions work until really the last 140 years. You get a lot more emphasis on missions. Okay, so we got millennialism, sort of this driving. We've got to bring the millennium in. We got to usher in Jesus's return, coupled with this European idea of colonialism, where we want to make people like us, and a lot of that had Christian language on it. We need to save these savages. Okay, I think those then get sort of wrapped up into another sort of thinking that we might call replacement theology. Okay, if you look at a lot of early colonial sermons, a lot of those sermons were about us in America, in this American experiment, talking about us as if this is the promised land, and getting out of the tyranny and all the things that you fought from in Europe, where this was like your exodus, and you were coming to this new promised land. And really, it's a good way. On one level, it's a good way to read Scripture, because you're reading your story into the Scripture and understanding your experience of exodus and freedom in God. On another hand, it has led to this idea, and I still hear it among Christians today, about us living in some kind of promised land. That either Christians talk about the church as the new Israel, or our country as the new Israel. That we replace Israel in all these promises of God. Now, there's some ways you can argue some of that biblically. This has huge implications for how you look at Israel today, by the way. There's so much anti-Semitism. And if you think about it, a lot of the, again, think historically, a lot of the anti-Semitism that comes out of Germany with the Nazis, they're influenced by some of this theology. Okay, they're wanting to start this Third Reich, this third region, with this third age. They're wanting to do that and usher in this new kingdom of the elite and of the best and the brightest. And because of that, they are replacing Israel. Okay, they're replacing the Jews in a lot of their theology. But I think that's so that can go way off. I mean, there is some ways in which the church is the next step in the promises of God, and I understand that. But when we start talking about the church replacing Israel, or our country replacing Israel, that gets us on a really slippery slope, and it leads to extreme self-righteousness and entitlement and arrogance that I think, getting back to Karen's question, it naturally leads to, like, if this is this great American experiment is from God and we are the new Israel, then the natives are like the Canaanites and we kick them out and we get rid of them. And so there is an abuse that sort of happens out of this theology. This is why I'm arguing that I'm not sure that that some of this Christian influence is a little bit warped. And I would go so far as to say that if you look at a lot of the struggles we have in our country today, some of these flaws sort of still manifest under the surface of some of our discussions. This self-righteousness and entitlement that we sometimes have as a country that does not mirror the humility of Jesus Christ. Okay, questions, comments there?
Jordan, I think what you said about get rid of the Native Americans, that emphasis here, since we're, Columbus is coming to conquer this nation, that's what's being felt in our nation. I mean, I have a couple of friends that have Indian background ancestry a whole bit, and so they're very affronted by anybody celebrating Columbus Day, and they want some kind of retribution. And so how do we handle this as a Christian country, which, we're such a cosmopolitan nation where we have all kinds of different religions. Though we believe in Jesus Christ, we believe in God as our Savior, other people don't. And their viewpoint on things. So, that's how do we balance that out? I don't know how to deal with, you can't say Happy Columbus Day. It has to be Happy Indigenous Day. And you don't want to offend anybody at the same time, it's a real struggle, if you understand what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Well, and it's the same thing we're wrestling with monuments and the names of schools and forts and things in the South that own slaves, right? I think the importance of Columbus and the importance of what he did do is valuable, and the bravery of what he did do is important, right? So I worry if we just throw out history that we don't like or that we don't agree with, and that's problematic. Right? I actually think Columbus Day is a great opportunity to do what we're doing, to talk about the pros and cons of Columbus, right? Let's talk about some of the good things, and let's talk about some of the struggles. So I don't know what the balance is. For me, it starts with just recognizing some of these things. We're going to be dealing with this next week a lot more with the issue of race, but just I find out so much of the race talk is about guilt, and I'm not sure. I'm going to argue that I'm not sure guilt is what we go for. I think it's grief, it's lament, right? That's the biblical answer to some of these things. Is we lament, we mourn the mistakes that have been made and the challenges, and we part of lamenting is naming. So part of what the prophets of the Old Testament, so in the Old Testament, there's a lot of abuse that goes on. Part of the critique of the prophets is, and part of their explanation for why Israel goes into exile, is the abuse of people. In other words, in Egypt, we were commodities. And then we got out and we were doing okay. We had kings, but then by Solomon, we were treated as commodities again. And we never quite stayed true to God. We ended up cheating on God, and prophets say that very graphically, cheating on God and abusing other people. So even the temple is built, how does Solomon build this great temple to God and this center for Israel's worship? Well, it's a lot by forced labor. And so part of what the prophets do is they name it and they point it out. And that, I think, is, I don't know quite how to go back and fix some of these problems except to name it and point it out and then be aware of my own attitudes in my own life. And just noticing how prevalent they are. So if this, it's helpful if you have, I should have told you this at the beginning, if you have a dollar bill, it works better. But if you don't have a dollar bill, I'll try to show you a dollar bill as I show you this. The dollar bill has the seal of the United States of America. And the seal has a lot of what I'm talking about with you. Okay, so the seal of the United States on both sides, on the back of the dollar bill. Okay, the first thing you see on the right is the eagle. I don't know if you know much about eagles. You're starting to see bald eagles now. I don't know if you've noticed that. They're really making a comeback. But if you know much about bald eagles, they're kind of jerks. Bald eagles will often steal fish from other birds. They often look like they can swoop down and really beautifully and majestically catch fish, but they'd much rather take it from somebody else. It's really not. Ben Franklin wanted us to have the turkey as our national bird. And what is in the eagle's hands? If you look at the dollar bill, it's olive branches and arrows. Okay, like peace and war, right? Conquest and submission. I mean, that's really sort of colonial symbols. We're gonna have peace and we're gonna fight. Like, we're gonna bring peace even if we have to fight for it. And it says "E pluribus unum" on that side, on the back of the seal. "E pluribus unum." Anybody know what that means? Out of many, one. Pluribus, plural. That's the word you would know. Out of many, one. And "E pluribus unum" is a great phrase. It actually comes from a pesto recipe. Okay, so pesto is like sauce, but instead of boiling everything together, you mash it. Okay, and so instead of the idea is not a melting pot. Okay, we don't melt everybody down so they just blur into nothingness. Okay, pesto, you keep all the individual flavors. Okay, it's just put together so that out of many comes one. They still keep their manyness. They still keep their individualism, right? We've made it a melting pot where everybody needs to mash together and lose their own identity. No. That's never been the idea. And really, we're sort of reversing this. We're at a point where we're like out of one, many. So we have just many groups right now. I think that's a problem. If you look at the other side, this is where this gets really interesting. So I'm showing this to YouTube here. Showing this to Zoom here. I can't remember where my camera is. If you look on the left side there, you'll get a pyramid. Now, pyramid's a really interesting symbol. It's a symbol of Egypt. So we are to have an out of Egypt sort of mentality and theology, but then represented by a pyramid. Well, the pyramid is a symbol of the Masons, which get a bad rap thanks to all these movies. What's it called? The Da Vinci Code, and these societies. The Masons were builders. The Masons really tracked their history back to the Knights Templar and to the Crusades. So what do you think is going to be a theological element of the Masons, particularly early on? Well, they were millennialists. Okay, they were part of the Crusades to free Jerusalem, to bring back Jesus, and part of the Masons were trying to build a world for Jesus to return to. It's part of their theology. Okay, and so there's the pyramid with the all-seeing eye on top, when God watching out for your work, and then the phrase "Annuit coeptis, okay, meaning approved undertaking. Approved undertaking. In other words, the Great Seal of America says God approves what we're doing. That's what it's annuit coeptis. And then what does it say on the bottom? Novus Ordo Secularum, Secularum, sorry. New Order of the Ages, you might translate that. New Order of the Ages. What ages? Well, I mean, talking about these different ages that Joachim of Fior was talking about. Okay, I mean, this is you look at the symbol on the dollar bill, and you look at our Great Seal. What you're going to see is a lot of this millennial, colonial, replacement sort of theology. Right there, you're carrying it around in your pocket. Just the ability. Christians need to know this stuff and need to be thinking about this stuff. We need to be able to question some of that theology and to question why we do some of the things that we do and say some of the things that we say. And I hope you don't hear me saying that America is not special and not valuable and that God didn't do some amazing things in bringing the United States together. I think he did. I just think if you speak about that, whenever we take our beliefs and we wrap them in theology and Bible, we turn them often into a weapon. And in this case, I think for a lot of American Christians, it has led to a sense of entitlement, and there's a sense of outrage when we lose any bit of that. And when you hear a lot of Christians talk about the election right now and who's going to win and how that's all going to pan out, it's like they're not just worried about the election. It's like our whole system of thinking about the world may crumble depending on how this election turns out. Right? I hear that on both sides. I'm not sure that the world really hinges on elections the way we think that they do. And that's what I'll say. Well, any more questions? Still, Charlie, you got anything you're thinking about there? Anybody on YouTube got comments? Okay. Well, let me say this. Let me end with this verse. It's one of my favorite verses. I preached this the week we went into COVID. I used this scripture. It's Psalm 20, verses 6 through 8. Now I know that the Lord saves his anointed. He will answer him from his holy heaven with the saving might of his right hand. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. They collapse and fall, but we rise and stand upright. I think my message for this whole 4 weeks of Bible study and sermons is this verse, right? Some trust in horses and chariots. Some trust in the military and guns and bombs. Some trust in protests. Some trust in police. Some trust in elephants. Some trust in donkeys, right? Some trust in this candidate or that candidate. What do we trust in? We trust in the name of the Lord our God. Okay? That's where our trust is. That's where our hope comes from. And in so many ways, I think that because of some of these theological challenges, American Christians have put their faith in America as much as they put their faith in Jesus. And I just, that ends up weakening both, ends up weakening our country, and it ends up weakening our faith and our churches. And I think it's worth being critical of those things. Not critical, I mean, by critical, I mean not just thinking negatively and saying crap about them. I mean thinking with a critical, like picking it apart and wondering about it and questioning it and looking at it from different viewpoints. What good, honest, critical thinking about the ways in which our Christianity has influenced our patriotism, and our patriotism has influenced our Christianity. And how do we start to get both of those back on track? Because I think we're sort of wrapped up in some of these theological challenges. Other questions, comments? Karen, did we talk enough about that? You're muted. Your audio's muted.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, no, it's okay, Jordan. Yeah, I think we've talked enough about it. I mean, I guess I just have a friend that I used to work with, and she is, being that she is part Indian, she's got ancestral history from original settlement here before Columbus came.
Yeah.
And she is so adamant that we have to stop celebrating Columbus Day. We have to pay refuge to the indigenous Indians that lived in this country that settled here to get that.
Yeah.
And there's always that chip, that's that chip on her shoulder that she needs to release it. I don't know what retribution our country can actually do to satisfy, to stop all of this. I put it loosely, but it's hatred, because they can't deal with moving forward. It's looking back at the past and keep being critical of it and say nothing's been done. And
Yeah.
it's a vicious cycle that doesn't look like it's going to end.
Yeah.
And I'd like to shake her, and I'd like to tell I'd like to say, okay, I'm going to tell her that you got a chip on your shoulder. Most of us get it. We understand Columbus Street, and he was looking for India, yes. So it was already inhabited. There were some horrible atrocities that happened. How do we get past it without making it continue to be a vicious cycle?
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know that I have a lot of answers. But I do think, like, isn't Columbus Day a great opportunity to have that conversation for me? You know what I mean? Wouldn't it?
For us, but because we're not Native Americans don't see it that way. They're still seeing such deep hurt because of their ancestors.
Yeah.
They can't run. They can't.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know the answer. And we're going to, next week as we look at issues of race, we're going to get into this too. I don't know what next steps there are, but I'm kind of giving away the end of my sermon for this coming week. But I think it starts, the only way it starts is with, like us, with looking in the mirror at ourselves and looking at my own attitudes towards people that are different than me, being able to have conversations, being able to grieve the mistakes that have been made. Even if I didn't make them, I didn't have slaves, I didn't do anything to indigenous people. But there's room. The Christian call is to lament, to be sad for how it happened, and to mourn what has gone on, and to ask God to bring a different future. So I think it starts with us. It starts with us having some of these conversations, and then I don't know what the next steps are, but that's maybe what we start praying about and discerning together. Well,
I've got a question, Jordan.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Jordan. One of our other things that we look at is that when we do the president's installed, or when you go to court and you're a witness, you're swearing to God over a Bible that your testimony is true. why do we use those things in a country that has such very views of God?
Yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? It's tricky when the country does that. It's tricky, I think, when the church has an American flag at the front, right? And should that be there? Shouldn't that be there? That's a tricky move. I mean, and this is huge debate right now over the potential assigning of this judge seat, right? Because she has strong Christian leanings, and for some people they want to get on her about that. Other people are saying, well, you can't get on her about religious, her religious perspective. It's got to be about her legal perspective, and how did those? I mean, you're right. It's tricky, and I don't know about swearing on the Bible. Do certain people have to swear on the Quran? What do atheists do, or does that mean anything? I'm not sure that. I think less and less courts are probably using the Bible for that case. I don't know though.
Yeah, I don't know that for sure. Yeah, just by what you see on television, how it's portrayed.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I said.
I got jury duty one time. I sat all day, and then I didn't have to do anything. I just went home. So I didn't even get to go into court or anything. It's all right. That's what I would rather do.
I've been a jury 5 times.
You were cutting out there, Charlie. Okay.
I've been picked for jury 3 times.
Yeah, I got called once. It's not too big a deal, really.
No, it's not that big a deal.
I will tell you, I'm a juror, but because I'm a pastor, normally one side wants me out of there real quick. So a lot of my friends who are pastors never got to trial. They never got to be on a jury.
Yes.
I'm a quick out for one side or the other typically. All right, well we're gonna wrap up there then. Thanks everybody. Again, Sunday talking about issues of race, and then Monday and then Tuesday kind of Bible study. Just going a little deeper on a couple of the passages I'm going to be mentioning in that sermon. That kind of thing. So, all right, I'm going to end YouTube. Take care.